have we here today? Well, looky there. Another BYOC kit. This is the Silver Pony, which is the Silver Clown Centaur clone. Ooh, this would be a fun one, huh? Alrighty. So our parts laid out. Resistors, capacitors, diodes, ICs, PC board, enclosure, peripherals. Let's dive in. Of course, as always, I recommend you snap off the little tabs on the pots. Ooh, there we go. These little guys right here, so that the pots can mount flush against the bottom of the enclosure and not be at an angle, because that would be bad. I suppose I should probably mention at some point, I kind of have an unfair advantage with these build kits because I do have a degree in electronics and pretty extensive background in amplifier building and repair. I was actually an amp tech at Savage Audio for about 5 years. Before that, well, after that I worked at Audio Research, which is the oldest audio company in existence, and actually started out at Rockford Fosgate with car stereo amplifiers, of all things. Alright, so we will get right down to business. Once again, installing resistors first. There's our board. There's our parts checklist, instructions, and whoa, crash. There we go, populating the circuit board. See you in a minute. Okay, just a quick note on how I do the board populating and a quick note on part tolerance. So I'm not quite done with all the resistors yet, but that's what it looks like. So I will put them all in and just bend the leads over so they don't fall out. And then when I'm done populating the board, I'll flip them all over and solder them all at the same time. The reason you don't solder anything is because you want to make sure you get them all in the right spot. Okie dokie. There is the populated board. Well, resistors are all populated. Quick note, while you have the board out and about and it's nice and easy like this, always look for solder bridges. Solder bridges are the enemy. They're the most common culprit for troubleshooting. Solder bridge basically just means, you know, if you have two solder points that are very close together, make sure they're not actually connected. It's pretty easy to put on too much solder and accidentally join those two little regions. Okay, next step is the diodes. So these are the 4001 diodes. Diodes are polarized, so they'll have one direction that they're going to go in. Here we go. There's a 4001 down here on the bottom. Notice the stripe is on top. Here, the diode will have a little stripe, a little silver stripe on it. So as long as that little silver stripe on the diode corresponds to the little stripe on the PC board, you're just fine. Now, when you get into this section here, little GE, that stands for germanium diodes. The germanium diodes, some of them have a stripe, some of them have two stripes. These actually have a black stripe and a white stripe. If you're really curious, you can dive into that on the internet. But what we're doing here with a distortion pedal is basically they're set up in pairs, like so. So honestly, they're going to get paralleled. All that means is one pair is kind of back to front like so, and the next pair is going to be back to front like so. And you'll notice that's exactly how they're oriented on the board. So you go up, down, up, down, up, down. So in other words, it doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to pick one direction. Say you put the white stripe up here, I'll put the white stripe down here. Orient them. They'll be basically in pairs, like so. Black, white, white, black, black, white, white, black, and you'll just be happy. The picture actually shows, get down there, oh. Picture actually shows them with blue stripes. That's just a different, probably a different brand of germanium transistor. Let's see how looking right here. So basically they're going down, up, down, up, down, up. Just as long as they're staggered like that, you're going to be just fine. Okay, there we are with the diodes installed. So the 4001s are the big black ones. The ones that say GE, those are the germaniums. Those are the big glass ones, and the only two that are left are these little kind of brownish ones. There you have it then. Okay, next step is going to be the ICs. We're going to solder the sockets onto the ICs. You don't actually solder the ICs. They are not exactly polarized, but you definitely want to watch orientation. So pop one of these sockets out, and you'll notice has a little notch on one side and flat on the other side. So the little notch is going to correspond to where the notch is on the board. So you see socket, and pop in just like so, flip it over, solder the contacts, and then you'll see on each one of the ICs it'll have a little dot right here. That'll correspond to the notch. And this one actually has a little bit of a little notch here, but it's got a much smaller dot, but there's the dot right there, if you can see that. Right there. And there's the IC sockets soldered into place. I wouldn't bother putting the ICs in just yet, just in case anything untoward might happen between here and the end of the build. Next is going to be the caps. Okay, first of all is the film and ceramic caps. These are the film caps, the little brown ones. They're not polarized, so it doesn't matter which direction they go in, but you have to make sure you get the right value in the right place. So on the capacitor itself, I don't know if you can be able to see this or not, but that says 683K right up there. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. My eyes aren't all that great, but that's what it says. So on the board itself, they're just marked with a little 683, making it nice and easy for you. You don't really have to know much about them. You just pop them in either direction, and the leads over so it doesn't fall out. Same process as before. We'll put them all in and solder them. If you're real curious to see what their actual values are, you can just pull up a handy dandy chart like that off of the Google, and the code. There we go. The code is what it says on the capacitor itself. Its actual value is either in microfarads, nanofarads, or picofarads, and there's way more information than you can shake a stick at online if you get curious. Okay, next up is the electrolytic capacitors. These are polarized. So if you look at the capacitor itself, one of the leads will be longer. That is the positive lead. The negative lead is actually marked, well, the capacitor itself is marked. The negative side is the shorter lead. The positive lead always goes into the square pad. So, they're actually very easy to read. This one's a 47 microfarad. And we're on the board here. Where is it? Oh. So the longer lead will go in the square pad like so. And the lead's over. And then, of course, if you want to check yourself, comes right on back to the picture. It's starting to kind of look like a picture now. And there is all the capacitors, resistors, and IC sockets in place. And the next step is the battery clip. And as always, they have their handy dandy little strain relief built into the board. So the wire goes up through the bottom like so, through the actual contact like so, and then let's just do one here real quick. Solder in place. You can see, pull the slack out. As you pull on the wire, you're not pulling directly onto the solder joint because that would be detrimental to the solder joint, I would think, almost instantaneously. There you have it then. And just like it says on the instructions, that this is a good spot to, you know, just have a quick peek, make sure that your capacitors are all moving in the same direction, or the correct direction. There's a lot of flux left on the board. I like to clean that off with a little bit of alcohol and some Q-tips, and right now is a good time for that, since the board is out and free and easy to get to. Okay, now it's time to make the jumpers. We're going to go to the jacks in various places. So what it says is cut 4 2.5 pieces of wire. This is, I've said before, one of my favorite tools of all time, the Klein stripper. Makes stripping wire quick and easy. Don't forget to tin the tips. I would normally use my helping hands for that, but the helping hands are holding the camera. So why do we tin the tip? Well, it makes everything much easier later. Tin the ends of the wires like so. So we're just putting a little extra solder there. We're just putting a little solder there at all. And got a little blob on the end of that one, so let's cut that off. There we go. So that will go through holes. It's probably going to be, yeah, places like this in the board, so that you can solder into place. And then the other end will go out to jacks, power jacks, you know, out into the real world. And there it is with the jumpers. Looks like it's reaching out to the outside world, doesn't it? Okay, next step is the power jack. So it is labeled tip, battery, and sleeve. And you can see that much better on the instructions. Tip negative, just like on a standard Boss pedal. Now I have found this much easier. Instead of mounting it to the enclosure and then trying to solder in that little tiny space, to make myself 3 little jumpers and color code them. So we'll call it tip black, sleeve will be red, and then battery will be the standard purple. And so I removed those jumpers from their respective spots on the PC board. And I'll just show you real quick. This is just a little soldering tip. A couple of ways to desolder. This is solder braid. And its job is to just remove solder. So I'm going in very dry, and you can see nothing's really happening. It takes a while for the braid to heat up, you know, for the soldered iron to heat up through the braid, and then start wicking up through the braid. So this is a little counterintuitive, but add a little solder on top, and whoop, see that? Just comes right on through. That's what you're really adding is flux, which makes solder flow much easier. So you've got a little flux on the braid already. If you get real lucky, you just go on to the next one. Ooh. And wick that solder right out of there. See it wicking up through the solder braid there? When solder starts flowing, it's like magic. The other method, of course, is the solder bolt, which looks like a very big, bulky thing in the video. I'll show you how it works. So you just heat up the soldered connection, bring in the solder bolt. Ta-doo! Oh, moved a little bit too much. So I didn't actually get all the solder out of the hole. See, this thing you have to actually cock it like so, and watch this. See a little tiny bit of solder that comes out when you actually hit the button. So I always cock it, fire it, cock it again. That way you don't get that little bit of residue dropping back down onto your board, which is just kind of a pain. I'm gonna throw something underneath there so I can get a little pressure on it. So once again, you want to add a little bit of solder, which is a little counterintuitive. You're not really adding solder, you're just adding some flux to make the solder flow a little easier. And there you go. 2 different methods of de-soldering. Fun, huh? And here is the jack with my color-coded leads. Kind of makes it idiot-proof when you go to solder them back onto the board. Kind of. Do be careful when you're soldering these contacts, because these threads on this jack are not metal, they are plastic, and if you touch them with the soldering iron, they will no longer be threads. Okay, now it is time to mount the PC board into the enclosure. So what we're going to do, essentially, you want to just set the pots and the LED. LED is also polarized. You notice it has a long lead and a shorter lead. Goes in right here. The long lead once again goes into the square hole. Do not solder anything yet. I'll show you why here in just a second. So essentially what we're going to do is take the enclosure, put it over top, and just sort of fit everything through here. And then, I'm not going to do it just yet, but you know what you're going to do is flip it over, make sure everything is nice and fits correctly, and then we'll be soldering pots and the LED into place. Now obviously you don't want to solder anything until you're sure it's all in place and ready to go. But sometimes what I will do, I may not have to do it with this one. Here's the leads for the 100K pot. You can't really put the pots in the wrong place because the 10Ks have 3 lugs and they're both 10K, so they're both the same. The 100K has 2 sets of lugs. But the most important thing is make sure you put the pots on this side. Ooh, there we go. Okay, put the pots on this side, not this side, because that would be incorrect. So what you do a lot of times is just take 1 or 2 of these leads and just bend them over just far enough so that it won't completely fall out of place. But what you want to do when you get this flipped over, you want to straighten these out, because when you get it into the enclosure, you actually want to be able to move the PC board around just a little bit so that you can prevent any shorting on the underside of the pot to anything on the board. Like I said, shorts and bridges are your biggest troubleshooting nightmares. And one other quick note, don't forget the switches. Remove all the nuts and everything off of the switches and the pots, because obviously they have to go through the enclosure and they'll be mounted on this side of the enclosure, not the inside. So there you have it then. I'll be right back. Okay, here's what it looks like from the front. Obviously, don't just, a couple of threads to keep everything in place for right now. And then what we'll do is, like I said, straighten these leads out. Make sure you get a little bit of play, up and down, and then we'll commence to soldering everything in place. Okay, and there it is in place in the enclosure, and we've soldered all the lugs, tightened all the nuts down. So far so good. Yeah, just make sure everything's relatively functional. And now the next part is, of course, the power jack. So it'll be very easy to solder these in place because now they're color coded. Yay! Just like so, and like so. You can't see that, but there it is. Oh, the heck. Grab the soldering iron and we'll burn the leads. There we go. So I'll grab the soldering iron and we'll just make it permanent, yeah? Now see, to me that's much easier than trying to solder these joints in place at this point. Alright, next step. Okay, next step is the jacks. So, one of them is stereo, the other is mono. The reason they do stereo is so that that'll be the input jack, so it's going to be on the left side, isn't it correct? Yes. It's going to be on the left side. So we're going to go ahead and mount it, but a couple of things to note. The input jack is going to be the stereo jack, and what that does is it interrupts power to the battery when you are unplugged, so it doesn't sit there and drain your battery. while it's not in use. So we're gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna finger tight this and show you a couple of things here real quick. So it looks like this one's gonna be real easy. The lugs are out in space, real easy to get to, and there's good clearance everywhere. So every once in a while, what happens is, here's how the jack works. Ooh, this one gets around a little. So, plug goes into the jack. Now you see this little leaf contact here on the jack. It'll actually bend. See how it moves? It bends just a little bit. It keeps tension on the plug. Yes, that's plugged in. So every once in a while, you know, it's going to bend backwards like so. So every once in a while you'll find one in an enclosure that's really close to the PC board. So you'll want to make sure that it's rotated in such a way that it's not going to hit anything. And for this particular project, we don't have those concerns because everything is nice and lots of clearance. You know, you want to keep it away from from hitting any of the other contacts or anything, but you know, those wires are easy enough to trim into place. So I will go ahead and wire these up as per the instructions and show you what it looks like after we're done. Okay, so there they are mounted. The next part is actually in the instructions. They want you to mount the foot switch. So you can see the lugs are oriented in a flat kind of a fashion. So they're kind of going this way rather than this way. So you want to mount them horizontally rather than vertically. So like so, not like so. Okay, there's the foot switch. Oh, I soldered up the jumpers to the jacks. The jacks, input, output jacks should be ready to go. Now the foot switch, it doesn't matter if it's upside down or not. There's no real upside down or not, as long as the lugs are horizontal, and they just sort of BYOC just numbers them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and then these solder pads on the board here correspond to those numbers. These little guys right here are jumpers. And when you're making the, well, I'll show you my jumper when I make it. And here's the two little jumpers on the switch itself. You jump 3 to 6 with just a little piece of wire here, and then 4 to 9. I always kind of try to trim that one because you don't want that piece of wire touching either one of these legs, 5 or 8. And there we are, all jumpered to the outside world. That's pretty much it for the solder connections. Now we're going to put the ICs in, and that's the home stretch. We'll see what it sounds like, hopefully. So that is it. Notice all the ICs are facing upward. All soldering is done, so that's basically what it's going to look like. Time to plug it in, find out. Alrighty. This is it, first time plugging it in. So the first thing I usually like to do is plug it in power wise, and then just grab a cable, go to the input jack. Ah, look at that, and our LED fires right up. So far so good. Okay. Out my, whoo, you can hear that. And it fired right up. Hope I got that. Oh, that's a good sign. Did you hear that little bit of noise? And grabbing my handy dandy bench guitar that you can't see. But here it comes. Oh, yep. Passing signal. Here it comes. That is number 3. Third BYOC pedal in a row that is fired up first time with absolutely no issues. No idea what any of it does yet. Well, there it is. Audio demo to follow. Okay, here's the audio demo. We're going to have a little bit of reverb, courtesy of the BYOC Spring Reverb from a couple of builds ago. Running a Yamaha Pacifica into my trusty Savage Mach 12. Here's what it sounds like with no distortion. Here's what it sounds like with no distortion. And with the Silver Pony. Run through the controls here real quick. Actually, that's my favorite setting right there. What you'll notice is that there's a lot of volume on tap. Look at how low the volume is. And we're not quite. Not quite unity even there. Tone and amount of distortion. Full up. And just a little bit. Pretty wide range of tones available. Getting back to my favorite setting right here. There you have it then. I think this is a really good sounding pedal.